Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Friday, August 2nd, 2024, and you are watching the Daily AI Show live. Today is our bi-weekly recap show where we take a look back at the shows and discussions that we've had over the past 2 weeks. And with me today, I have Andy and Junmi, and I am Beth. So these past 2 weeks, just quickly, we've covered what we're using AI to learn, and which AI we're using to learn. We've covered the 5 levels of AGI that came out from OpenAI. We've covered Google AI Studio. We've also covered businesses offering AI as a service, such as Get Floor Plans. This week, we've covered prompting with GPT-4o Mini. Who owns your avatar? And if you were with us yesterday, you know we covered the challenging opportunity of empathic AI. So we're going to dive into these. That doesn't even mention any of the news stories that we discussed in these past 2 Wednesdays, or any that we didn't get to discuss. So on that note, Junmi, do you have a story or an update that you would like to share about one of these shows?
I do. I have a couple. One small, tiny story, and then one larger one. The first one was a piece of news that I didn't get to. As everybody knows, I like to concentrate on either good in AI or science in AI, and they usually are a crossing Venn diagram. But this story is about Birmingham University coming up with a self-powered bug that can skim across water to detect environmental data. Okay, so there's been a big, a big push for creating a larger Internet of Things and more sensor data and more, just more information about the environment as a whole. And so that's usually easy to do when you can move around on the ground. But over 70% of the earth is water. So what they are trying to develop here in conjunction with a DARPA program is they want to create something called the Ocean of Things. So it's an Internet of Things, but for ocean-based devices. And so they're coming up with this little robotic bug that can skim the surface of the water and take all of the sensor readings and everything they need to do to monitor the environment. Now, one of the key components of this is how can you get this thing to be small enough and self-powering, right? Because that's the key thing. There's not a lot of cables out there to power it. And because these are small devices, currently solar technologies and things like that aren't necessarily efficient enough to power the device. And they're trying to make perpetually powered devices here so that they can be sent on long missions and just stay out there. So what they're creating is bacteria-based batteries. And so some strains of bacteria can generate power as they're being fed, right? So they get fed from components that surround them, and then they generate a fair amount of power. Now, they have been able to devise batteries that can generate 1 milliwatt worth of power, and that might be enough to cover the power requirements for these robots. Now, what they're applying AI is they're trying to use machine learning to figure out which combinations of bacteria will produce the greatest output. And so it's really about the bacteria-based battery that they're using machine learning to figure out which combinations, how much bacteria, size limitations, and power output that they can get from doing all of these tests. And again, this speaks to how AI and machine learning are really applied in science right now. Science is a lot of mundane testing over and over again, and AI is able to do all of that testing really, really quickly. So that was a story that I wanted to cover on Wednesday because it's just a fun story. We're going to have little skimmer buds, helping out NOAA or whatever agency monitor climate changes in the middle of the ocean where there's no people, right?
Fascinating. It's related in my mind to something that Ray Kurzweil, a leading thought, advancer in the world of AI, has said about the coming transformation of health and wellness for everyone who can afford it. That's going to be accelerated by AI and technological advances like the power model that you just described. So this one of the most exciting things that I ever read, from his books, is this concept that if you fast forward to a couple decades from now, one of the main causes of death in the human population is heart failure. And so there's this pump that we depend on that, over time simply gives out. Now, you could, pursue strategies where you're trying to preserve the functionality of that pump and maybe rejuvenate it. But another one, which he posits, and I think is brilliant, is what if you replaced your blood with a medium that's filled with nanobots that are all self-motivating and can move anywhere they need to go and have greater oxygen and nutrient carrying capacity than our hemoglobin. So shrink down these tiny little things and now just replace your blood entirely with that. And it doesn't matter whether your heart stops, because these little nanobots just continue to move around in the system and go to where they're needed. So this is part of this concept of converging technologies that allow us ultimately to far exceed the natural lifespan of this body. And it's related also to the idea of Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, which is not only do we have the ability in Life 3.0 to change our software, but also our hardware, the physical substrate that we depend on in order to maintain our consciousness and our knowledge. So power at a micro scale is a really interesting advancement that's related to those things, which would allow us to change our hardware in a way that extends our lives.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I know I've said it before in previous shows, but we are in the cyberpunk era right now. So if you've read any books by William Gibson or Bruce Sterling, Neuromancer, Johnny Mnemonic, things like that, those books were written like 40 years ago, So if you want a clue what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years, just read the books and they'll be like, oh, I can see that. Yeah, they introduced the basis of that. Oh, man, that's awesome. I mean, they also took it from a slightly darker dystopian future, which I hope that gets bypassed. But the tech wise,
right.
Yeah.
So if we take that to like the next thing, the heartbeat, that is one of the ways that we verify life, might not be an indication, right? Obviously, when people are determined dead, they're also determined brain dead, right? And so what you're saying, Andy, could still show brain waves and things that you could measure in that. But that is fascinating. The other thing that I want to highlight is that the idea that we are building AI so that AI can help us build the next level of AI is showing up all over the place, right? So one of the things that is true is that one of the reasons that so much power is used is because we need like giant amounts of data and giant amounts of compute in order to train more and more intelligent models. But it is likely, and we go back to Max Tegmark's story, it is likely that we're like smashing nails with like giant boulders, right? Like we're being very inefficient. We're literally just throwing everything that we have at it. And at the moment, it's not at a place where it can tell us a better option, right? But it is likely that we are building through that smashing the rock on the nail AI, and AI that will be able to say, hey, actually, we can do this much more efficiently, right?
I think there's a progression when you start out with the process of trying to capture all the world's knowledge and develop reasoning in artificial intelligence, silicon intelligence, let's call it. That process is consuming a lot of power because you're hoovering up a lot of information. And we're reaching the limit of what information is available to train AI. And as you may know, there's a whole process underway for AIs themselves to create synthetic data, generate new data and new examples from which it can learn, because there's not much left that they can hoover up. And that process of collecting all that information and feeding it through these transformer architectures in order to develop large language models that comprehend languages and coding systems and everything that is needed to be known about the world, as represented by the internet, which was a precursor technology that made it possible to have this data available. Once that's done, there's representations in those models that don't require any further power to transport to another intelligence system. So you get more and more efficient as you move forward. And as an example that we've discussed on long ago on a much earlier show, if you merge LLM models, it doesn't require the compute for training. You just take the weights of this model and the weights of this model, and you do some math between those two. And if you've trained model A to be really good at math and model B to be really good at, creative literature, when you merge those models in this technological process called model merge, imagine, you merge those models. It doesn't require a lot of power. It doesn't require a lot of compute, but you get a new merged model that has the capabilities of both the prior ones. So you can see these things actually becoming more and more efficient. And refined algorithmic approaches beyond the capability of transformer algorithms, may also increase the efficiency of the entire AI ecosystem.
Right. And we know that Anthropic is kind of already doing this. Anthropic actually trains in general on much more selected but smaller data sets, right? They're not in these giant amounts, at least so far. And Sonnet just recently got bumped off the top of the leaderboard. And I will share my update because that's a segue. Google has released an experimental model, and you can go into AI Studio and preview it. And it is an experiment of, it's still listed as Google, as Gemini 1.5 Pro, but it's 1.5 Pro experimental. And it has taken over the leaderboard on some of the measures, like coding, like reasoning, those sorts of things. And the people that we listen to, like Ethan Mollick, have said, wow, okay, this is definitely something interesting. So if you're somebody who likes to test the new models on your favorite prompts, it's available in AI Studio, and I suggest you go there. The second piece of Google news in relation to that is that it looks like they're going to drop their Flash prices. Now, when we covered this in the AI Studio show, they have like incredibly generous free packages. So if you're not building for like a product, or like you're having a bunch of people use your resources, you won't necessarily get, there's a lot you can do. I'm not going to decide what you're doing. You do whatever you need, but there's a lot you can do with the free, with the like daily free limits. But they've figured out a way to deliver Flash less expensive. And so I believe August 12th is the day. Flash prices are dropping like 80%. I mean, like it's a giant kind of, it's a giant thing. So if you haven't played with it, go play with it. You can play with Flash in AI Studio as well.
Yeah, I just yesterday read about the not the experimental version of Flash, but the existing Flash one, and its cost compared to Sonnet. And apparently the million tokens output cost of Sonnet is $35 or something. Or no, I'm sorry, got it backwards. $15 per million tokens. It's very inexpensive. $15 for 1 million tokens of output. That's what you're being charged as you operate that on a paid plan, through the APIs. On Flash, it's 15 cents per million output. That's how much cheaper Flash was. Now you're giving me news that it's going to be even cheaper than that. And that's in relationship to an argument that's being made that the cost of inference to consumers of inference is going to go to zero. It's going to be free. The combination of open source models and, it won't be free in respect of power, having, I have to plug my computer in to get it to run. So I'm going to have to pay for some electric power, but the cost of the actual inference is going to be very, very low.
Yeah, that is an amazing difference in price. I did not realize it was that much. I don't have a lot of experience with Flash as a model in particular, and I know it's supposed to do the more simple kind of responses and get a better response. Have any of you compared it to the other lower end versions to see how it stands up? Basically, I mean, 15 cents for 1 million tokens is fantastic, but is the output around there?
Yeah, so the smaller models aren't really of interest to individual users of these systems, because the frontier models are the ones that have broader capabilities and sort of astounding capabilities. And the smaller models are more suited to automations and routine operations like classification, or even something simple like translation. Those things aren't things that I'm using on a routine basis. I'm actually more actively involved with, okay, how does the dialogue and conversation that I have when I engage with this frontier model, how is it qualitatively different from another one? Because I'm interested in that. I'm not interested at the moment anyway in trying to automate routine tasks. Those smaller models are quite suitable to that process, but I just, my answer to your question is I've never even thought of trying to play with the smaller models, because I see what their purpose is. Their special purpose, narrow, focused, dutiful little models. They're really, really powerful and really inexpensive in a narrow range. But if you're wanting to talk to an artificial intelligence, you're going to want to play with the more expensive frontier models.
So gotcha. One of the things that I use smaller models for is fuse shot prompting, right? So I might use a larger model to create a series of examples. So something like, and often I switch models, right? Like I might use Claude Sonnet because it's a really great writer to give me some examples that are wonderful, right? And then I'll pull them into something like Claude Haiku, or I haven't done it with 4.0 Mini just because I don't know, because that hasn't been impressive enough for me to justify playing with that. Also because it doesn't have the multimodal input. And Flash you can upload audio to. And feel like that's true. I think I did it. I did do it when I was demoing. because the Gemini models are multimodal native. So I find that really interesting. But that's what I use the smaller models for. And if you have, so we talked about this on the AI Studio show, and I'll just recap. If you have a pattern to your writing or to your output, and you're not having a ton of success in describing that in words to give AI instructions on how to do this, you can just give the examples, which is few shot prompting, and let it infer the pattern, right? And again, one of the reasons to do this backend stuff is that you can go in and correct what it gave you so that it's what you want, and leave it, and it reads that as what it gave you, right? So you're actually able to say, you're saying, hey, I give you this, give me something back. And they give you something back, and you go in and you tweak it. And so now it's a good thing that they gave back, right? And now you go, oh, look, you did so well. Let's do it again, right? And you can do that, and it gets to a pattern that is, I think, a little easier. And the smaller models do better at that than the larger models because they haven't been pushed quite as much with reasoning and like knowing how to do, like, be a real thought partner. The smaller models weren't really designed for that. So if you're using few shots, sometimes that's a better option.
And it's arguable that the smaller models, being more confined and purposeful, have a lower tendency to hallucinate.
All right.
Okay. I'd like to shift over to an article that I want to recommend, and I'll give you the reference to the article in a moment, but it's about AI being a services economy revolution, not impacting so many other things. And we've talked about service as a software being enabled by AI tools, and that was just in the last couple of weeks. And we've covered it on a couple of other shows in the past as well. But this article discusses the impact of LLMs and says that it's the service economy, and particularly knowledge work sectors, legal, healthcare, and education, that are going to be most impacted. It also, says that AI advancements are, providing for significant automation in those sectors, but enterprise adoption is slow, mostly experimental at this stage. There's a wait and see kind of attitude, I think, among enterprise. And that's given rise, this isn't discussed in this article, but, related is, that's given rise to some concern and articulation of a pullback in the investment in AI that's going to kind of cause the bubble that exists today in the purchase of chips for inference and all of the investments on AI. It's going to go through a recession of sorts. Why? Because the automation adoption using AI in actual enterprise workflows is going to be slower and experimental in the first years. And so that if the deployment of AI is going to be more gradual than we expected, then it's not going to be the go, gold rush kind of times that we've experienced in the last year and a half. The other conclusion that caused me to want to share this is that it gives direction on not only what general kinds of things you can do to support enterprise, if you're a developer and or an entrepreneur or a company wanting to do something in there, but also gives the specific industries in which that's going to be, most applicable. And the conclusion that they come to is that specialized AI startups that leverage LLMs to focus on industry-specific workflows will have the early competitive advantage. And because, finding an industry-specific, really narrow flow, like we talked about on the show about the floor plan thing, because those tools and technologies are extensible to other industry workflows, the ones that find one that actually can gain traction early on are the ones most likely to end up succeeding in broadening their application to multiple industries and being one of the most successful AI companies out there. So let me tell you who this is. This is, let me close this. It's in digitalnative.tech. The fellow who wrote it is named Rex Woodbury, and it's called AI is a Services Revolution, How LLMs Reinvent Knowledge Work. And I wanted to just comment on one of the charts that he has in here, and there's a lot of good information in here. But the areas where the most automation could be occurring is office and administrative support, legal, architecture and engineering, business and financial operations, community and social service, management, sales related, and then it starts to drop off all along the line. And if you're wondering if your job is in jeopardy, here's the jobs that you can consider to be very well protected against this. If you're working in facilities maintenance or cleaning, not likely that AI is going to impact your job at all. Installation, maintenance, and repair. And by the way, these are very large service economies, right? These are the areas where there's a lot of people employed to do this. Construction, extraction of materials, production, transportation and material related, personal care and service. All of those things, they have a very large share in terms of numbers of humans that are being applied to them and are very well protected against AI incursion. So if you're a knowledge worker, you're not so safe, especially if you're in some of those categories that I mentioned.
Okay, but did you not just list a ton of jobs that are at the lower end of the economic spectrum? So those
Indeed.
also would
That's right.
potentially not be the highest priority for companies to replace?
Good point. And let's point out that over the course of the lifetime that I've lived, there was a major shift of manufacturing from the United States to offshore. And all of that, which is not easily replicated by AI, was replaced by service and knowledge work, which is replaceable by AI. So we find ourselves in the US economy as primarily delivering GDP in the form of services. And many of those services are going to be delivered by AI in the future. It'll take some time. Remember that adoption is slow, but fast forward 20 years and the profile of what the humans in the next generations are going to be doing is going to change very dramatically. But in those economies that have maintained a kind of production oriented or manufacturing oriented profile, China, Vietnam, others, Taiwan, etc., those countries will have an easier transition, I think, as AI is incorporated into those processes.
That's interesting, because it seems to me that the training necessity for replacing those jobs is faster, right? Because like manufacturing has already moved to robotics, right? And so what those sectors are going to do is smarter and smarter robotics, right? If we look at that, yeah. And I think I get you, I hear you, and I think that in that context, while it may be slower, it may be rapid when it happens. Right. So that may not be that helpful.
And the rapidity is at that super intelligence moment when AI is smart enough to redesign itself and can go through multiple iterations of redesign in order to achieve a superhuman capability on an individual basis. Like, the assistant that you're talking to is far more competent than I could ever be. And And when that happens, then things are going to really, accelerate, and they're going to happen very quickly.
Right. And also, like, there's like for manufacturing, right? It's already robotics. If you get smarter and smarter technology to be able to replace more humans in that context, there isn't nuance in training the new system, right? That's what I mean. Like you just push the new update, and now the system can produce twice as many as it did before, or whatever.
So what you're saying is when manufacturing industries adopt AI and robotics, that's easier to do than to replace a lawyer.
Right. Because the lawyer ultimately talks to a human, right? Yeah. And the manufacturing talks to other AIs or equipment.
It's not a widget. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
And I would say the same thing for cleaning. Although there is that meme or joke going around that is like, wait, I want AI and a robot to like do the things so I can make more art, right? I don't want a robot that makes art for me. I want it to do my dishes and laundry and vacuum. And we all know Carl wants it to like take out his recycling, which is his target. That's what he's looking for, the robot that can take out the recycling. So yeah. Justin is saying that he read that 12% of enterprise employees use AI tools regularly and just 8% can write effective prompts. That learning curve is definitely going to take a few years. And also that while companies may be adopting AI at whatever level they are, they're not adopting AI education at the same level, right? I mean, and this is where we go back again, like it's not software. You can't just like, hey, go figure out how to use this new program. Right? It's a new spreadsheet thing, right? Like it's a spreadsheet thing and you can figure that out. AI is not like that. Junmi, you said you had 2 stories. Did you do both of those?
Yes. The second story is, so we had a show Tuesday, this last Tuesday, I believe the 30th or something like that. And we talked about AI avatars and duplicates and who owns that and things like that. Well, the next day, senators officially submitted the No Fakes Act for vote. Now, we talked about this a little more detail when they were talking about the draft that they had announced back in April. But after having that hearing and getting input from, various tech leaders, various artists, to get insight on what adjustments would be needed to the draft before they submit it, they finally did release that and did submit the No Fakes Act. And basically, the broad strokes of it is to create a federal right, essentially a federal-based right to your likeness, right? Especially in duplication and AI recreation and things like that. And one of the key sticking points of this was in the original draft, they didn't have any mention of assignment versus licensing versus and duration. So they put in those details so that you can have licensing but not full assignment, and that I believe it's limited to 10 years and 5 years if you're under 18 and things like that. But the right itself expires 70 years after death of the individual. So lots of input from previous precedent from copyright and things like that. This is as part of it, there is a de-incentivized clause in there too for notice and takedown processes, how many years you have to identify it. There's certain limitations on that as well, and then a whole list of fines if you if you don't go through that process. So this is the main reason I bring it up is not only because of the topic of that show, but it does show that there is movement in closing that gap between society and technology, and so there's a lot of catch up that this bill helps with. Does it cover everything? No. Do some organizations still think that this isn't aggressive enough for protection of generative AI, likeness, duplication, and those kinds of fields? No, but it is definitely a big step towards it, because it does at least establish a federal mandate that preempts anything that any state might come up with. So it kind of a nice umbrella to start with. And in conjunction with that, the next day, yesterday, the Copyright Office released their first part of their copyright and artificial intelligence initiative. All right, so under the aspects of the Biden administration's AI.gov and pushing towards, analyzing, researching, and building around AI, the Copyright Office came out with their first part. And essentially, it talks about one, identifying the issues, recommending that there is a federal law. So it whether it was convenient or it really tied into pushing forward the No Fakes Act, the Copyright Office gives their stamp of approval. And their main concerns, of course, are, how what are the rights specifically, how AI how much AI is contributing to the creation process when you're applying or submitting for a copyright. And these are all things that, from day one, people were like, okay, what are the answers? And they didn't have the answers. And the Copyright Office has gone through a couple of different sessions of having an open forum to receive responses. And I believe this last session that they put out there, that official notice for input, they got like over 1,000 responses that were specifically about AI, and then like 10,000 responses about copyright in general and things like that. So that seems to be getting the ball rolling on more discussion at the on the government level, and what kind of steps that they're moving forward. So nothing specific about how they are like implementation. This is more of an analysis of here's all of the potential issues and pitfalls and things that we want to address. And again, that covers a lot of privacy protections, copyright protections, IP, all of that field. And so I just want to be clear that this is not they came out with new rules. They didn't come out with new rules. This is just the first part of their report. And since it's only part one, we can expect in like the next 90 to 180 days, because that's their limitation given to them by the administration, to come out with the rest of their report on this. So keep an eye out for that. If you really want to know how the law and how the government is viewing AI and IP, those are the two things to follow right now.
Yeah, that's huge, right? Because as we're talking about all of this, there is this like underbelly of, oh, just a small reminder, you might not be able to copyright that, right? And so
Yep.
like and when I talk to people who are not deep into this, I get back like, no, I prompted it, right? I wrote the outline, I did the whole thing. I was like, yeah, has not been tested. And according to the current copyright, it needs to be human generated. And there has not been a lot on like the nuances of how much is enough for human generated.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I think that should doubly be highlighted, especially in the light of AI duplicates and AI avatars, because one of the artist speakers, artist known as Twigs, was making a really good point about how she uses her own AI duplicate to interact with fans, but technically that's not copyrightable. So she doesn't necessarily have rights over that in the current framework. But again, not a lawyer, so I don't know the details there. Right. But on the surface, when you read what the Copyright Office's current guidance is and what they have said no to so far, it pretty much aligns.
So that's interesting, right? Because you do have ownership of your likeness. We talked about that. That's already covered. And you do have ownership if you created a 3D cartoon, right? Like you have that. If you can't create it with AI, right? But you could actually do that, and you could animate. You could connect those two. But yeah, no. So that, I think, wraps up our 2-week recap. Thank you so much for joining us for that. Welcome, Rajat. And where was the other one? They left. Okay, welcome. Hey, and next week we turn 1. We look good for our age, 100%. The show started last summer on August 7th. So our 1-year anniversary is this coming Wednesday. Look forward to that. We're also going to talk about, I believe next week, we're talking about Denmark, because Denmark is like showing up in all the research as doing amazing things with AI. And we would like to dive into that a little bit more. Like, what are they doing? But they are also the happiest place, the happiest country. So those are maybe correlation, not causation. I'm not trying to make news here, but we will do some dive into that and see what's happening. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Friday, everybody.
Aloha.